Hi again. We're down to the last two chapters. Chapter 28, The Choice of Freedom. Tony cornered Doug as he stepped from the car. She walked up to him without the pretense of polite salutation. Doug, I hear you decided to take the family on a vacation before school starts after all. Trying unsuccessfully to hide his irritation, he stood for a moment with his back against the open car door, facing away from Tony. Straightening his shoulders slowly, he turned around to face her as she approached. He had pasted on a fake smile that didn't fool Tony for a second. With a smile that didn't go any further than his mouth, it reminded her of the Joker from a Batman movie. A little too jauntily, he said, Well, hello, Tony. How are you tonight? Ignoring his pseudo-friendliness, she said, Fine, thanks. Anyway, I heard from Audra that you plan on taking the family on a vacation. Yes, that's right. I gave your suggestion some thought and figured it was a good idea. Why? Well, if you don't know where you're going yet, I thought I could help you out. I have some friends in Washington State that own a B&B. I was talking to them last night, and they were telling me that they're always a little desperate for customers by the end of the summer because the tourists start leaving to get their kids ready for school. You'd be going at just the right time. I think I could get you a couple of rooms for super cheap, you being friends of mine and all. Probably more than half off. And where they live is absolutely beautiful. Green trees, hiking, boat rides, right on the coast. Something I think Jody and the kids would love. I haven't made any plans yet. No. Where in Washington State is it? It's in a place called Kokanee Bay, right next to Canada. I've been there and it's gorgeous. And at the end of summer, you might even see whales migrating. There are islands all around that you can tour, a cute little tourist town for shopping, and some great restaurants. That does sound nice, but I don't know. Listen, I think the girls would rather go to Disneyland or something. Oh, I know, but Audra and Lexi are a little too old for Disneyland, don't you think? Besides, you know how Jody loves nature. It would also give the girls a chance to see the most northwest tip of the country, maybe even go into Canada, and I know they'd love to see whales. That's true. You say I can get your friend's place half off? Maybe even more than half off if I vouch for you and they know for sure you're coming. It does sound nice. Just wanting to help, Tony said. Okay, I'll take it. Listen, tell them we'll be there for the middle of August, around the 15th. Great, I will. You're going to love it. Dela had been the first to come home. After having a summer of traveling and being indulged, she had developed an attitude of ruling superiority that only 14-year-old can master. God, Mom, she said on the second day home, you need to stop bugging me. I have friends to call before we leave on this stupid vacation, so I need some privacy. Lexi came home next. She walked around the house, trying to avoid everyone, looking at her parents in a way of non-recognition. At dinner time, she asked for a piece of toast. When Doug ordered her to eat more, she responded with, Mom isn't eating. If she doesn't eat, why should I have to? She then stomped away from the table, went into her bedroom, closing the door with a definite bang, and stayed. During the day, she would come out of her room long enough to shower, drink juice and water, and then retire back inside her room. Jody's attempt to connect with her was met with the statement, Nothing's changed. Sometimes she mixed it up with, Nothing's changed with me or with anything else. But her answer always started with the empty word, nothing. On her third day, she snapped at her mother to stop asking, Nothing ever changes around here. I just want to get this trip over so I can return to Grandma and Grandpa's. Audra was delivered home at the end of the week by Travis. Jody had watched her emerge from his car with a sunken heart. Not wanting to cause an unhappy homecoming, she simply hugged her daughter and watched as Travis helped himself to a soda from the fridge, as if he was a member of the family. Once back in his car, he gunned the engine until Audra stepped outside onto the porch. Leaning over the seat, he yelled out the passenger side window that she had better be remembered to call him when she was gone. Audra nodded and waited for him to speed off down the street. Seeing her mother behind her, Audra simply walked past her into the house and held up her palm at face level in a way that said, Don't bother me, I don't want to talk about it. In the privacy of their bedroom, Doug reprimanded Jody that it was her fault Lexi still wasn't eating, that Audra wouldn't confide in her, and said Dela wasn't excited about their vacation because of her. All your moping and crazy behavior has everyone on edge. I'm not even sure if anyone wants to go on vacation with you," he berated. Jody had been excited to have her daughters home, but secretly she didn't want the vacation to Washington State either. It was just too far away from Dougie J. Who would watch him? So after Doug made it clear no one wanted to be around her, she left the girls alone and spent the days in their backyard among the flowers and ferns, digging, replanting, hiding. Once in Washington State, the owners of Hearth and Home Bed and Breakfast were Bill and Vera Miller. They welcomed the Warren family on their arrival like old friends at a reunion. The couple looked more like brother and sister than husband and wife. Both were smaller than average, Bill not standing more than 5'4", and Vera a good 4 inches shorter with the same color of dark green eyes. The one prominent difference was Bill had short curly gray hair and a round boyish face, whereby Vera's hair was black as tar, cut straight across at the shoulders with a face so heart-shaped her chin was almost comically pointed. Their small statures gave people the misconception they were meek, but once meeting them, the fact was learned quickly that they were both bold and straightforward, no-nonsense types of personalities. The Miller's B&B sat on the south end of Kokanee Bay, overlooking a small inlet that was fed by the southern waters of the Strait of Georgia, flowing from Canada. It was built in the Victorian style with a porch that wrapped around 3 sides of the house, a turret with a white shingled peak, and an upper deck on the 3rd floor with an iron railing that resembled a crow's nest on a ship. The lawn was wide and green, sloping down to a small rocky beach that cradled a white gazebo and a worn wooden dock that reached out to sea like a beckoning arm. Doug had opened introductions to the Millers with a statement that booked no argument. "We're here on vacation, but mainly for my wife to get some rest. I hope you understand if she appears unsociable, but I think it's best if she spends some time alone to recuperate." The Millers acquiesced to his request with a silent stare of ambivalence. So while Doug golfed and the girls roamed the town and beaches, Jody wandered the grounds of the B&B, always feeling the eyes of the Millers on her. She didn't know if Doug had told them to watch her, but to hide from their prying eyes, she began exploring deeper and deeper into the woods surrounding their house. Almost daily she ventured farther and farther with each walk she took. On the 4th day of the vacation, Doug cornered Jody inside their room before going down to breakfast. "Jody, I know you had plans to go with the girls today to some farmer's market, but I want you to stay here. I want you to be rested for this afternoon because we're taking a boat tour to an outlying island to some kind of heritage center and dinner. The local Indians put on a show or something. Listen, I want you to be at least somewhat coherent enough to enjoy it. I'm spending too much on this vacation for you to go nuts on me again and do something foolish that will embarrass me." Looking in the mirror, he adjusted his collar as he continued roughly, "And make sure you take your medication. You've started that ridiculous blinking again, and it needs to stop. I thought you'd quit doing that." He walked out of the room with authority, confident she would obey. Jody watched as her family got in the rental car and headed toward town right after breakfast that morning, to shop or visit a museum, she didn't know what. She didn't feel abandoned. She didn't feel sad. She didn't feel anything. She thought that the blinking Doug had scolded her for had given her a headache, but as she watched the car head down the hill and turn the corner, the pain vanished along with the red glare of the brake lights. She waited until the car was completely out of sight, turned toward the side of the house that was protected by the woods, and disappeared along a narrow dirt trail. Retreating into the solitude of the thick forest, she savored its calmness. A quiet, thin aura of mist surrounded the pine trees like moist smoke. She crouched every so often at the trunk of a tree and let the wisp of coolness drift around her. She let her thoughts go dormant and allowed whatever feelings that floated to the surface overtake her. Sitting against a large trunk, she thought she'd heard footsteps behind her. She turned and peered through the dense forest. Seeing no one, she dismissed it. It was the forest watching over her, she reasoned. The noise and eyes she was convinced were always around her was nothing more than the elves who lived in this part of the country spying on her. She got up and walked farther into the shelter of the woods. She knew the fairies had not abandoned her as she went deeper and deeper into unknown territory, unafraid. Tinker Bell may have never been found back home, but she knew the little fairy was still protecting her somehow. They had a network, a fairy network. She chuckled to herself at the joke. Jody hiked along the grass-strewn trail until pine needles and new growth camouflaged its contour. She could feel the air around her, wet and cool from the dew on the plants. The day was crisp and sweet like peppermint on the tongue. The sporadic light coming through sparse openings in the forest ceiling mesmerized her. The olive, chartreuse, and bold green of the leaves flirted with the blue of the sky. Half a mile from the B&B, she came to a circle in the forest, a tiny mountain meadow that looked like it had been cleared for a winsome cottage. The grass was short, mid-calf, with tall clumps of clasping pink monkey flowers molded together with yellow fiddlenecks and the remaining remnants of nodding onions. The copse of trees surrounding the mini meadow stood like tall wooden soldiers ready to protect the area from harm. She circled the plot slowly, not wanting to tarnish the freshness of the grass or trample the sweetness of the flowers. At the western edge she heard the sound of the ocean as rebellious waves, smelling of fish and salt, slammed against the shore. She looked up through the interstice of trees to find the ocean, not more than 40 yards away. Turning toward the water, she made her way carefully over fallen branches and around the sticky hairs of turbulent grass until she stood on the closest spot of open beach. Letting the scene before her unfold like a drama in a play, the waves crashing like cymbals, sun beating off the water like floodlights, seabirds singing in a choir, she stood transfixed, waiting for the climax. Then, when she thought the story was at its apex, she saw the clouds above her and a ray of sun, brighter than any light she'd ever seen, burst through into the stage below. Bright red, yellow, orange beams flowed down from a large white cloud split down the middle. She waited, knowing the lead actor, God, would descend. Becoming impatient for him to make his entrance, a feeling of quiet unrest started to consume her. Entranced, she walked toward the light, eager to feel God's presence the moment his feet touched the ground. She headed to the ray, keeping her eyes on its brightness for fear it would disappear if she looked away. She walked until the cold of the ocean nibbled at her ankles and made her look down, breaking the spell. When she looked up again, the cloud had closed in upon itself and the light was fading into muted colors of prosaic wash. It made her want to cry. She had missed her chance. As if on cue, a lone pelican screamed above her and flew out to sea, startling her at the sound. She looked up and watched it fly toward the horizon, a horizon that seemed so near she could almost touch it. She knew then it wasn't God's intention to ignore her. Instead, he was showing her the freedom that beckoned just on the edge of the world, a world maybe not even a mile away. A mile she knew she could swim easily. She could feel the freedom pulling at her as if a rope were tied to her breast and slowly, firmly tugging her forward. Her chest and arms ached from the pull. Her mind wandered beyond the spray of the ocean. All she had to do was walk out into its depths, a slow walk in a straight line to freedom. Freedom from the pain, the loneliness, the burden of obedience. She took a step forward, then another, following the beauty into a crystal world of fairies and peace calling her. Mrs. Warren? Bill Miller walked up to the edge of the water, fishing pole in hand. She was thigh-high into the surf. Mrs. Warren, he said behind her, catching her attention, "You've got to be careful this time of year. The water can be strong with undercurrents." From a distance, eons away, she could hear his voice behind her. Looking down slowly, reality came back with a harsh slap. The weight of the water tugging on her pants and the goosebumps freckling her flesh surprised her. She looked back at Mr. Miller, an apparition born from the sand. Blinking in confused awareness of her surroundings, several seconds passed as she mentally shook her head clear. Giving a shy little chuckle, she said, "Oh, silly me, I was just so caught up in the beauty of the water, I guess I wasn't thinking." "Yeah, that can happen," he said matter-of-factly. "You better come on out of there, though, before you lose your footing and get completely drenched." Yes, of course. She treaded carefully out of the water, letting her thoughts thaw in unison with her skin. "Would you like me to walk you back to the house? I'm done fishing for the day." Bill Miller had walked into the water and took her hand. helping her the last 5 feet out of the ocean. That would be nice. I guess I lost track of time. What time is it anyway? Do you know? It's almost 2, he said without looking at his watch. Oh, my family will be back soon. I'd better go and get ready. We're going on a boat tour. That's what I hear. They walked in silence a few moments until the awkwardness of his closeness made her uncomfortable. Looking sideways at him, she asked casually, "Do you fish around here often?" "Whenever I get the chance." He was a man of few words. "Oh, well, my husband likes to fish. Maybe I'll tell him about this spot." "Best fishing is out at sea. Fact is, I'm going fishing out there later this afternoon. I've got a buddy with a boat. Wouldn't be surprised if I saw you out there." "Oh, maybe I'll look for you." "Yes, you do that. I'll be keeping an eye out for you, too." There was an underlying tone in his voice that she didn't understand. They continued their walk in silence. Jody watched him from the corner of her eye, his right hand holding his pole that was slung over his right shoulder. Every once in a while he took her elbow with his free hand to help her over beach debris. Bill Miller reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a granola bar. "Would you like this?" he asked. "I noticed you missed lunch." Looking at the bar, she refused it with a little revolting shudder. "No, thank you. I'm not really hungry. I think I should save my appetite for dinner tonight." Putting the bar back into his pocket, he walked beside her, slowing his steps until he was a foot or two behind her, like a bodyguard who was forbidden from getting too close. Jody walked ahead of him. Every so often, she risked a glimpse of him from the corner of her eye. She pretended to look out at sea. For being on the small size, he was an imposing man, yet somehow he was beginning to make her feel safe. Becoming uneasy with their positioning, she stopped and turned to wait for him to catch up to her. "I hope I didn't disturb your fishing." "Nah, I wasn't having much luck anyway." Turning as he caught up to her, they continued on walking side by side. His presence enveloped her in a warm breeze of security, chasing away the chill. She found their deep stillness comforting, not unlike an old friend who knew her secrets, making conversation unnecessary. Trust in him came easily, so that when he stopped to tie his shoe, she stopped with him. He lay his pole on the ground, and as she stood patiently waiting for him to finish, she stared at the top of his head, his bent shoulders, the pole on the ground. Liking the colors of red and yellow stripes that circled the brown rod, she followed the shiny string creeping itself up along its sleek body as it wrapped around itself, ending at the hook snagged firmly in the end ring. Never once did it occur to her the fact that the pole lay alone on the sand. There was no tackle box, no net, no fishing gear of any kind. Chapter 29, A Slow Descent into Sanity. I'm thinking I'm going to have to stop there for just a minute, and I will be back.